And also with more than 10 years with the Environment Department, working in community engagement, supporting local government with energy efficiency and climate change projects alongside land managers. Please welcome Mark Caddy. Mark, it makes sense probably to start with governmental perspective on this. What is the net zero plan in New South Wales?
Good afternoon, everyone. New South Wales Government has a net zero pay. It's going to be in 3 phases, and it's going to take us from 2020 to 2050. So we're in the first 10 years of that plan. At the moment, it's covering a lot of stuff around energy generation, particularly wind, solar. There's a lot of the stuff in there about industrial decarbonisation, a lot of stuff about transport, and agriculture is a really key part of that as well. The reason agriculture is going to play such a big part is that the sequestration potential of agriculture through soils and vegetation is really done. Quite untapped, and to a point, it's a little unmeasured at the moment. So that's why New South Wales Government is really putting a lot of effort and energy and money into this.
A big focus of the grant funding is to get real-world examples of what the challenges are, what can be achieved. Wilmot Cattle Company grant recipients alongside 12 landholders. Can you explain a little bit about the purpose of project and why Wilmot was chosen and how the other 12 landholders were chosen too?
Well, the show of hands about who doesn't know about our high impact partnerships means we need to do a little bit more in terms of communication. The high impact partnerships is just one of our grant streams. We've also got some grant streams going to smaller landholders as well. But we wanted to leverage, I suppose, the knowledge and capacity of organisations like Wilmot and companies like Atlas to actually really accelerate how landholders can become part of a soil carbon project. So in your intro, we talked about scale, and that's what this project is bringing. So soil carbon projects over 20,700 hectares, not quite to 80,000, but we might get there. You might even get there in the 30s. But we're really trying to explore what are those things that enables landholders to participate. We're really trying to investigate what those barriers are that keep them out of soil carbon projects. We're also doing a lot of work in the how do we make it easier for people to understand the complexities of soil carbon projects. You often hear the word complicated used, and there is some complexity because the process needs or the systems need they need integrity, and that comes with having checks and balances, and people see that as a complication one for something. So we're using people like Atkins to help smooth that pathway through for these poor landholders. The great thing about the landholders so far is that they're spread right across New South Wales. So part of our other interest is what makes a successful soil carbon project in different parts of New South Wales. Is it that soil type as the key limiting factor, or is it the rainfall as the key limiting factor? So those are the sorts of things that we really investigate. The data will really help us understand that, and as these projects mature, we'll find out a lot more, and therefore the government will be able to enhance and refine their advice about soil carbon.
Mark, you mentioned the gradual maturation of these projects. It's worth explaining before we invite our graziers up that these projects are all at different points in their journey.
Yes, they are. They're all being registered, or having been registered under the last involved. But so they are sort of all at a relatively early starting ground. The thing that the thing that I find most interesting is they're going to be doing a range of different interventions under the soil carbon method.
Sean, we'll talk about Atlas Carbon's involvement because you've been intrinsic to these projects through the Maya grazing tool. Can we talk a little bit about the properties being in different locations, different climates, terrains, soil profiles, production goals? What are we discovering so far?
Okay, I'll be pretty brief because I'm really keen for this session a bit more about the Graziers than us. So what we've learned so far is that there's an appetite out there for this. Thanks to the New South Wales government for doing this and for Wilmot for leading on the project. And it's good that we're going to have Graziers from different rainfall areas, different sizes, and that'll be great to have field days out there. So we're going to for each property that's involved, we're going to hold the field days of people who are in that area and see how a soil carbon project works for them. We're at the early stages. That is just that painful process, doing the paperwork, doing all the assessment. We've got all projects submitted to the regulator. The first ones that have, after a few months, been registered. So we're ripping into implementation. So I think even the journey so far has been interesting for the Graziers, but we're just beginning.
I'm going to introduce our Graziers because I think it's a good time to hear from them. We'll start by one. Please welcome to the stage Jared Doyle. And Jared, feel free to bring those seats forward so our crowd on this side. I realise we've positioned me as blocking you a little bit. But Jared, you and your wife Suze run a fourth generation family farm called Coventry, 2,400 hectares of beef cattle property south of Tamworth. Am I right? Fantastic. Hugh McMurtry. Hugh and his wife Anna run McAg. That incorporates 4 beef cattle properties spanning 7,000 hectares in the Bingara district. All good, Hugh? Correct? Excellent. Scott Michelle, who I just realised I'm really good friends with his mum. Put your hands together. So you're not related to Judy, who's the backbone of the agricultural show movement in New South Wales, are you? Yes, I am. He's from Castletop, which is a 3,300 hectare beef cattle property east of Narrabri, also home to an excellent tourism business called Bike Territory. Welcome, Scott. And finally, Scott McCant. Welcome up, Scott. Come on. Hails from the historic Deepwater Station, 1,675 hectare property that's been in the family for 150 years, merino sheep, cattle, tourism enterprise. These are our Graziers, but of course we want to hear from Wilmot too. Please join me in welcoming Shane Curtis. Shane, 30 years in ag, property management, development of operations across beef, sheep, crops, and we're going to talk a bit about Paradise Creek where you are and the broader Wilmot approach to these high impact grants. But I think it might make sense to start, Jerry, if you could give us a sense of where your project's at today. What's the status of the work that you're doing? What are you looking to do and how's it going?
Well, no. Second time lucky. Yeah, thank you. So where we're on to, we've been probably investigating this for close to 2 years, I think. And so there was a little bit of thinking time, a little bit of learning time, a little bit of absorbing information, risk analysis, making decisions. With the help of Atlas Carbon, a very rigorous project, process, which we got a lot of benefit from even before deciding to progress with the carbon project. We had now got our project registered. I think it was September, Sean, does that sound right? Yes. Yep, so we got that all clear from the Clean Energy Regulator in September. So we're going now try to hit the implementation phase. Chris wants to know a few things getting away and make that a bit slower than they might have been, but we're up and running, so I guess this is the fun bit. We're getting to spend heaps of money and do lots of things that we've been wanting to do for a long time, because our additionality feature is to increase the density per grazing. So historically speaking, we'll probably set up as a sex stock merino operation, because that was the advice my father had at the time. He'd been chipping away for 30 years, going from 7 paddocks to 40 paddocks, but we want to really accelerate that. We've gone up to 60 paddocks between Dan and I, but we want nearly double that. So that's our implementation plan. it's very easy, I've discovered, to do fencing on the computer. You can draw lines really fast, and same with the troughs, they go in really well on the computer too. But actually getting them in and up and running is slightly more complicated, but it's an exciting part of the process too.
I'm curious to know, when did the penning drop for you? When did you say, hey, this is something we want to look at? And it might have been many, many years ago. And were you ever doubtful of the suitability of your property for a project like this?
I'm not sure there was a specific penny dropping moment. I think it was more a slow burn learning, and as you tend to do when you're on the farm, there's time to think, and sometimes too much time to think, and particularly when we were feeding livestock during the 18, 19, 20 drought, there's a lot of time, and that then sharpens your senses to, okay, is there a better way to do it than this? Is there ways that we could improve to avoid this happening next time, or at least delay how long it takes? So combination of a lot of time, more information becoming available, and then getting advice from trusted sources, Atlas and others, sort of pushed us over the edge, and we sort of decided to take the leap of faith based on the information that we had at the time. Understand there's no guarantees with everything. Then it was really the process with Atlas that identified whether our particular farm was suitable or not. We took their advice that it was. So now I guess it's up to us to try to follow the implementation plan that we've got in place to see whether we can actually achieve the outcomes that we're all hoping for.
Thanks so much, Jared. Hugh, your property's up at Bingara. You're at more of an embryonic phase in this journey. Can you tell us, what are you looking to do, and what was your catalyst for getting involved?
Well, I suppose I became involved, I keep abreast with sort of threats and opportunities to the beef industry. Over the years, you could sort of see the political debate, media coverage of the whole carbon space just snowballing. It really became a no-brainer that agriculture, like every other industry, was going to need to play its part. That drove me to investigate further, and I certainly felt there was an opportunity there, and the change in our management practices was, I felt, we're going to be driving sort of carbon. We were going to be sequestering carbon if it went the way we wanted it to. There's a significant opportunity there. So our operation is beef cattle operation, and we've got a few different criteria that we've registered with the Clean Energy Regulator. The primary one is the grazing management. So we, like Jarrett, subdividing a lot of paddocks, installing water infrastructure. We need to sort of go down that path so that we can really hone in and manage our grazing management. We're also looking at correcting mineral deficiencies and things like that in our soil. So principally sort of the application of feedlot manure from our feedlot and gypsum, rock phosphate, to sort of correct nutrient deficiencies, principally sort of magnesium, calcium ratios, that sort of thing. We're moving from a annual cropping system to a more perennial pasture program. And the final one is we are also sort of adapting some of the sort of natural sequence farming principles and slowing the sort of flow of water across our landscape. As we've got quite a bit of topography, there's a lot of water that runs onto our place and off our place, so we're sort of trying to manage that at the same time.
Hugh, if I understand correctly, you've got sort of 4 critical initiatives that you're working on then across the properties. Which is getting the bulk of your attention? Where are you throwing most of your energy?
Well, grazing management is going to be key. That is probably the one that's going to really drive the greatest potential. The other ones are all probably just fine-tuning, just to produce the maximum amount of grass that we can, perfect it, and just cycling that through the cows, through the livestock, just to get that carbon back into the soil.
Scott, Michelle, where are you at in your journey today?
We've literally only just baseline, so I'm even more fledgling than these guys. I remember the feathers the other day there. But same as these guys, the process is there. There'll be a lot of people here thinking about it. not sure. You're all here though because you're on an incline in your management and where you want to go. So the weird thing is you're going to just have to step into the space and make it happen, because it will happen. That's where you're going, and that's what I found was not even necessarily these guys, but your own. You want to improve. You're doing everything you can. Then you realise there's all these other benefits, and that's led to this carbon market, which Atlas then comes through, and same thing. That then they come on property and check that they're the catalyst then to say yes, this is viable and very doable for our business. So yeah, there's all these little steps that keep leading, and they're all leading this way, and now we're ready to move ahead again. You always think you're doing better and moving forward at a rate of knots, but it's still happening. It's a really good space to be in, but it's another underlying income for the place, not just for me, for in the future. So succession comes into it and things, but even to keep it simple, yeah, get into it, do it and make it happen.
And Scott, your property too is one that has different commodity groups. You've got your sheep, your cattle. You've also got a tourism business on yours as well, a deep water station, very famous property for those who are not from this region. Can you tell us about your thinking? How did you decide this is something we really want to be involved with, and what were the reasons behind it?
I think the first time I started thinking about it was, possibly 10 years ago, when I'd already sort of started trying to work out how can I improve our compacted soils, and decided sort of carbon was probably, organic matter and carbon was probably the way to go for us. Went to a few carbon sequestration talks. It was very confusing. You're very, very new in those days, and very daunting. So sat on it for a while and thought, yeah, it's probably something that will be very helpful down the track. And it wasn't really until 3 or 4 years ago that organisations like Atlas appeared, where it made the whole process a lot less daunting, and streamlined it, and would hold your hand through the process. That it became something that seemed doable and accessible. So at this moment, we're not registered. I think we've done the baselining, and the project's been submitted like that. We have registration yet at this stage, so you can't really talk too much about what's happening on that side. But we'd sort of already started doing a lot of the planned grazing management and things like that. So it wasn't such a huge decision to make that more intensive and more and show more commitment towards it, which I think is the basis of our thoughts on how we're going to get there. So that was the decision was relatively simple because of that.
Shane, I'll come to you in a moment with Wilmot's perspectives, but I've got a bit of a two-part question for our 4 graziers who have just spoken. One is, who did you need to get on side in the business? The family, the accountants, other parties that are involved? No grazier as an island. Who else did you need to sit down and talk to about this? Were there any black hat comments around not going down this path? And the second question I have is a great one that Atlas gave through to me, which is, what is the most exciting part of what you're doing? Is it the future income from carbon? Is it increased production in your core business? Is it playing a part in climate change, or is it building a more resilient business? What was sort of the main goal focus for you? I'll start with you, Scott.
Well, pretty well, it's all of the above. It's a real complete package. The additional income stream would be lovely, but just the improvement in soil carbon, improvement in production and animal performance over time is definitely a motivating factor. It was it's probably the biggest one. Is just to improve things and increase resilience overall. I think we've all been hand feeding way too much the last 5 or 10 years, and to probably make our business more resilient to not have to do that as often would be fantastic. As far as getting people on side, because we'd already started down a planned grazing system, our main focus is to just intensify that, and because everyone was fairly comfortable with planned grazing already, that wasn't too big a hurdle to get over. Everyone else, and strange, or I suppose it's not strangely, but it was very interesting when I started discussing it with our bank manager. They were actually very interested and sort of said, look, it's actually something that the banks are starting to really look at, because they're starting to get pressure from the people they're borrowing money from to sort of validate where they're investing the businesses they're investing that money into, and making sure that it's going to a project that's ethically suitable. That was quite an interesting thing.
I think you've just answered for all four of us, really. But yeah, exactly all of that plus more. But yeah, same thing, Ed, with the relation with the bank. I remember coming last year and every major bank was here, and I wondered why. They're probably here for free lunch. But I remember going home and talking to the bank saying, I think this is something I want to go into, might have to borrow some money to more infrastructure, things like that. And at the time, even they didn't. They seemed to know much about it. But 3 months ago, they rang me and said, oh, that thing you're doing, we've now got a package and we're getting help. Like, yeah, the space is changing quickly. It's pretty good. So, yeah, we want to be in there. But same for every other reason as well. That's why we're there, for the improvements and profitability.
And Scott, for the people that are in your first concentric circle of influence for your operations, were they supportive of taking on these projects?
No one knew what I was talking about, really. No, everyone was sceptical. You know, why would someone pay you to change your ways and your management and want to be involved, or people want to be involved in your place? But once they looked into it with me and we researched and found out more and everything, and then everyone was on board pretty quickly, knowing that the benefits just far outweigh anything we were doing anyway.
Hugh?
Yeah, well, we're very similar to what everyone else has said. We're really going into it for productivity, production gains. We're implementing practices to drive soil health, pasture management, livestock performance. So number one is the productivity side of it, and that's what's really exciting us, that the soil carbon project goes hand in hand with a increased uplift in production performance and profitability of our enterprise. I think by adapting such practices, which I really view as best practice management strategies, I'm only strengthening the business for future generations. I suppose on the future generations issue, like, I guess, who knows down the track whether having a whole lot of ACCUs attached to our farm is going to sort of provide them with a tremendous market opportunity if they're trying to sell beef into whatever market, really. The consumers are demanding more sustainable, more environmentally friendly products, so having those ACCUs can only be a bonus. So really, we're not going into it as a get-rich-quick scheme. They're going to sit there. If we need them for our own offsets, then great. The other thing, as Scott sort of mentioned, is the finance side of things. Like, who knows, green loans may be a real thing of the future, and they may be a significant discount to general finance. I guess probably one thing that I really relish the opportunity is next time I'm sitting in the pub and I've got a pocket full of vacuums and one of my mates sort of start talking about sort of farting cows destroying the planet, I can sort of prove my position black and white of where our carbon, where our beef sits in a sort of environmental sort of space.
Some real public relations opportunities there for you. I like it. Hey, we've got to do what we've got to do. Jared, and your thoughts. Who do you have to get on side? And why are you doing it?
So I'll cut and paste what Hugh and the two Scott said to save us going through all of that again. Certainly exactly the same thought processes there. And then I'd perhaps add on top of that it's just that triple bottom line. I got to the stage where I really wanted to be proud and happy with how I was running my farm. And when I got to the end of my stewardship, to think that I'd done everything that I could to hand it over in the best condition that I could. Now, there's no guarantees on following that path, but this is the decision I've made to try to achieve that goal. So to me, that's important to have some self-satisfaction and some commitment to what we're doing in a longer-term perspective. As far as convincing people in the concentric circle, probably the first challenge was my wife, who's a CFO in an off-farm business, so very financially literate. So it probably helped me to understand the numbers better, to have to explain it to her and walk her through the process, and then we could walk the bank through it simultaneously. And so I think that was a really helpful process to work on that together with her financial literacy. So that was probably the main one. And then something that just an observation that may or may not be relevant, but I've got 3 children who were teenagers at the time, now range from 14 to 20. When explaining it to each of them, and whether it's because they've got fresh eyes or a different generation, or whether they just wanted me to shut up, I'm not 100% sure. But when I explained it to them, they all seemed to be completely convinced that it was a great idea. They thought that it was almost a no-brainer to coin the popular phrase. So I just found that a really interesting observation, that without the sort of overhang of historical management and ideas on agriculture, that was the conclusion they came to.
Just leaning obvious for that generation, isn't it? We're going to make our way with the microphone back down towards Shane, but no, you've got a moment here, Jared. Only if you have picked up something along the way that's an interesting observation, surprising fact, or a lesson that you'd like to share with other graziers. I'm just going to give you all the opportunity to share now.
Well, very quickly, I think it's and it probably leads in with what Ashley said about the integrity of the process. It is a very thorough process from my perspective to actually get the project approved by the regulator, and then the baselining process is hugely complicated. And Ben over there in the colourful shirt spent nearly a week at our place driving around drilling holes, and the technology he had to cart with him and the amount of information he had to lodge for every single hole that he dug was, and I know that came with backup from Atlas and others providing the data. It was quite an interesting process to watch. So I certainly have faith that there's a lot of effort being put into the construction of the programs, and hopefully that stands us in good stead in the future when we need to defend the integrity of the accies that are produced.
Fantastic answer, Hugh. Any lessons, observations, surprises?
Well, all the same as what Jared just said, but I suppose taking a deeper dive into what generates soil carbon. One thing I really have learned is how little I actually knew about soil chemistry, sort of soil life. So that's been a bit of an eye-opener, and really there's so much there that that really needs to be learned for a successful project.
Bit repeating ourselves a lot. But yeah, I guess if you pull it simply, it comes back to soil. You're looking after the soil, and everything's coming from that. And so does these projects. They come from soil. So that's the main thing, totally. Soil, and dealing with Atlas in the way that they're the specialists and will help you get through it all. Well, that sort of, it's bloody complicated. I wouldn't take it on at all. But yeah, not only that, they're there all the time. They specialise in that, and things are changing all the time, and we'll get the benefits out of that from them.
The only thing I'll add is it's worth doing the initial consultation just to have Bart and Rafe on your place for a day, just drilling deep holes and having a look at your soil and really having a look at what's there and getting to the nitty gritty of how it all works. It was a great day. I really enjoyed that.
My sense is that it's a lot of effort to get this stuff off the ground and that it's really an enlightening process too. But Shane, I want to speak to you. Could you set the scene first of the role that Wilmot's playing? You're out of Paradise Creek, but the role that Wilmot is playing with regards to the 12 landholders involved in this?
Yeah, so Wilmot's positioned very well to be a supportive role and in that mentorship role for the 12 participants. Very lucky in Wilmot. Obviously, there's 4 properties in there and they're all at different stages of the carbon project. So I think we've got the skills to be able to mentor, talk about things we've done well, some things we've learnt from and the learnings on that, and then try to make the process a little bit easy.
Let's talk specifically about grazing management practices because that's a massive theme across all of the landholders projects. What are you seeing in terms of the status quo, what people were doing, what they will be doing now, and maybe each of you just want to grab a mic and contribute to that? What are some of the actual changes that are occurring?
I think the biggest challenge is observation. Will be the biggest challenge. It'll just be seeing both your country change after you change your grazing practices or subdivide paddocks or give watering points in different areas. And I think even monitoring some data out of Maya and seeing actually what yields are of paddocks and whatnot on that, I just think from the grazing metrics point of view and actually seeing something, but then seeing a number beside that as far as yield or what it potentially could yield will be pretty powerful.
Did any of you want to add an initiative or a change that you're making with regards to grazing management as part of this project? Hey, that's on. That's okay. Well, can I ask you then, I'll start with you again, Shane. What are some of the other activities that are occurring with regards to driving carbon sequestration?
I think for us, increasing our biodiversity layered with that grazing practice is probably where we need to be, and I'll speak specifically to Paradise Creek, where it's really early stage. There's that development of that program. We've gone through our subdivisions, we've gone through our water infrastructure, and now we're probably getting to a stage of thinking, okay, if we've done a few core fundamentals, what might be that next step? And then I think with that biodiversity in our pastures, you'll add that extra layer.
Shane, final question for our graziers, but don't go anywhere, Sean, because I've got one more for you. One quick, short, sharp piece of advice for others in the room that are teetering, saying, all right, it's time, I've got a bit of information, it's time to get the application into play. What's some advice that you have for people just stepping into this boy?
I think the statement that was said in the room over there early on is right on. It's the fact of, do the co-benefits, could they potentially outweigh our ACCU? That will be my take on it.
Fantastic. Scott?
I can't really think of anything better than that, but yeah, I think it's the number of benefits that you're looking at. It's well worth talking to as many people as you can and really having a serious look at it, because it's I think it's going to be beneficial on many fronts.
Your advice, Scott Michelle?
Quite simply, take the step. It's all a journey, and you've got to start it, so take the step.
Hugh? I think it's something, if you're going to go into it, you need to be passionate about it. It's a long-term commitment, so we need to have a fair bit of passion in the whole space.
Derek?
To try to come up with something different. I think maybe don't get put off if you hear certain segments saying that it's not a good idea. That's not to say it's right for everybody, but at least do your own research and make your own decisions on your own specific circumstances.
fantastic contributions. And Sean, I just want to ask you the question. Atlas Carbon have been really involved in all of these projects, but also with Wilmot Field Day for a long time. What's the significance of us all coming together with organisations like yours, with government, with Graziers? What makes this event so special for Atlas Carbon?
I think for Atlas Carbon and myself, it's like coming to an event of this scale with people who had their own views of a like mind about pushing the boundary like these guys are, trying new things and having a conversation about it. So I think yes, in fact, my third role, others have been veterans for a lot longer, but I used to work for a greedy group, WWF, and worked in the sort of ag space, and I never actually came to embed that what was as impressive as this, as far as the thinking and the ideas and the action to make things better.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mark, Sean, Jerry, Hugh, Scott, Shane. As I was sitting listening to these wonderful contributions, I just wrote down a couple of attributes that I felt that all of them shared up here. They're optimists, they're future focused, they're solutions oriented, they are passionate, and they're incredibly proud of the work that they get to do. Please thank them one more time.